Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down how Belgium's three-man backline destroyed Russia in 45 minutes. But before we do that, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. But now let's quickly look at the lineups. We have Russia in more of a 4-2-3-1. Zuba ahead of Miranchuk with Yonov and Zhirkov out in the wider areas. And in midfield, Ozdoyev and Zobanin. Then we look to Belgium, still 3-4-2-1, Romelu Lukaku up front, ahead of Martinez and Eden Hazard. Out in the wingback roles, Castagna and Thorgan Hazard. In midfield, Kevin De Bruyne and Axel Witsel. So now, let's get to that first half, see what Russia did well, and see why they couldn't cope with Belgium's three-man backline. So when we break down Belgium against Russia, 3-4-2-1 against 4-2-3-1, you really see it and you look at the shapes and you assess it and you expect Russia to cope with Belgium's threat, even though they do have the better players. And initially it did look like it was going to work out that way. When we look at the board, you have Russia dropping off into two banks of four. You have Zuba against the back three. And really the only worry that you do have is that Alderweireld and Vertonghen can push forward and play positive passes. But the other factor there is that you had Miranchuk, who looked to be sitting on Witsel, and then you could push Zobanin or Ozdoyev to Kevin De Bruyne and then have a spare man dealing with either Mertens or Eden Hazard drifting into central areas. What often happened there was that initially they were in two banks of four and they were blocking off the passing lanes into De Bruyne and Witsel as Zobanin and Ozdoyev did step forward. But as the game wore on, with Miranchuk not sitting on Witsel and neither of those two blocking off the passing lanes, the only other way that they can really go about it is drop off very deep and allow Belgium to push forward or press high. And the biggest worry about them pressing high is the fact that Belgium's counterattacking threat is legitimate with Mertens, Eden Hazard, and Lukaku pushing forward with Kevin De Bruyne, the catalyst from deeper positions. And if they did press high, it would really involve a team effort as they push higher up the pitch, because if you have Miranchuk sitting on to Witsel, then that sees Zuba step out to Boyata, the wider players pushing out to Vertonghen and Alderweireld, and then you really need Petrov and Fernandez to step forward to close down the wingbacks in Thorgan Hazard and Castagna. So when you look at that and they push a bit higher, then there's space out in the wider areas for Mertens or Hazard to drift into and just hope that Belgium can get the ball over the press. When you really do look at that as well, the fact of the matter is that if Miranchuk isn't sitting on Witsel, then you have a big issue in that center of the pitch area. And the other aspect of it is the fact that you need those fullbacks to push forward. And if they don't push forward, then you have a big problem because the outlet is left for Castagna and Thorgan Hazard to push forward. And with Yonov pushing into the path of Vermaelen, then Eden Hazard can shift over to that left touchline and then make it 2v1 with himself and his brother running at Fernandez. Whenever that was the case and Yonov did push forward to Vermaelen, Ozdoyev was tasked with shifting over, but he could never stop Eden Hazard 1v1. So what they would try to do in that aspect is that they wouldn't want to push high. They'd want Yonov to drop off a bit deeper and have Eden Hazard in those 1v2 battles, or at most have Ozdoyev shift over with the Hazard brothers and make it a 2v3 battle going down that left-hand side. So that's how Russia could go about it. For the most part, they were dropping off deeper and trying to contain the threat of Witsel and Kevin De Bruyne from deeper areas. But for the most part, the most interesting feat of the match was how Belgium did look to approach the game without the ball, because going forward, you know what you're going to expect. The wingbacks were pushing high to peg back the fullbacks, and that creates space for Mertens or Hazard to either drift out into the wider areas or tuck into those central positions. And then Kevin De Bruyne was trying to get the ball in between the pocket of Zhirkov and either Zobanin, or you have Ozdoyev on that channel with him. So if he tries to drop off into that space, he's trying to get the ball and push forward. But for the most part, he was dropping off deeper to pick up the ball, trying to evade the press, and then trying to get players into attacking areas. Belgium, on the other hand, dropped off into more of a 5-4-1 without the ball, and it was very narrow. And it did put a lot of pressure on Hazard and Mertens to track back, because what what ended up happening there was that you had Lukaku just ahead of Ozdoyev to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball. Hazard and Mertens at certain times of the game were caught in space between the fullbacks and the center backs, and it really gave Russia the license to push forward with their fullbacks, because when you look at it, they're supposed to be a narrow 5-4-1 without the ball, and Hazard and Mertens are supposed to step out to press Petrov and Fernandez. But for the most part, in transition, when Russia were able to get the ball, Petrov and Fernandez were able to push forward. And really, if you look at their base shape, the only threat that Belgium should have had was the movement of Miranchuk, because when you look at it, you have Witsel and De Bruyne who can step to Zobnin and Ozdoyev, but Miranchuk is the free man, and even if he does drop off into those pockets of spaces where he was able to get onto the ball, you can ask Boyata to step forward towards him, and that was a way that they can go about it. But as the game wore on, what we ended up seeing was that they would have one Belgian midfielder, whether it be Witsel or De Bruyne, sticking with Miranchuk, and then they would have the free Belgium central midfielder step to the ball to press. So if Witsel steps out to Zobnin to press, then De Bruyne would stay put, and then if the ball was switched to Ozdoyev, then you'd have De Bruyne step towards him and Witsel retreat into that space for Miranchuk. So in that aspect, yes, he did get some openings where he received the ball between the lines, but they never really tested Courtois in those areas. It was the fact that when you do have Mertens and Eden Hazard caught in those narrow high positions, yes, Russia does risk the gamble of being hit on the counterattack, but they did have Petrov and Fernandez constantly take advantage of the space that was presented to them, and that's where Russia were able to find their openings. So when we look at Russia's chances, a lot of them stemmed out in the wider areas where they were trying to get overloads by pushing the fullbacks forward and attacking space in behind Mertens and Eden Hazard. The first one that we do see is Miranchuk sliding the ball out to Fernandez, which does now ignite Thorgan Hazard to step forward, and once he steps forward, there's space in behind him to exploit, and that's where Yonov makes that run in behind Thorgan Hazard. So when he does receive the ball in right half space towards the box, you do have Vermaelen do a good job of coming across to sweep up danger and do his job as that wider center back. When we look to the next example, we have Dzhikiya sliding the ball out to Petrov, who's breaking into space behind Mertens. What he ends up doing here is that he cuts central and ends up splitting Kevin De Bruyne and Witsel to find Miranchuk between the lines. And Miranchuk now cuts back into that space, this time splitting Toby Alderweireld and Castagna to find Petrov continuing his run towards the byline. He delivers a first-time cross into the box, and we do see Dzyuba climb over Vermaelen to nod the ball wide of the net, but it kind of does highlight the way that Belgium are being exploited out in the wider areas, and that's what Russia wanted to do. Get the ball in behind the wing backs, get crosses into the box, and hope that Dzyuba or a runner into the box can connect with them. When we look to one more opportunity that does highlight this way of going forward, we end up seeing the ball slid out into the path of Fernandez, and this time Eden Hazard does close him down. What he ends up doing is that he clips the ball over the left wing back in Thorgan Hazard, and we end up seeing Yonov make that run in between Vermaelen and Yonov. What we also see is that we have Dzyuba occupying Boyata and Alderweireld, so when that ball does go over the top into that right half space, Vermaelen again does very well of coming across to clear that danger and ensure that space in behind Thorgan Hazard isn't being exploited. Besides that, all we really saw from Russia was trying to get long balls over the top, trying to get Dzyuba to break free across those three center backs, but he doesn't have the pace or the strength to outmuscle those three center backs, and Russia's attacks were very limited. Whereas when we look at Belgium, we end up seeing them utilizing isolation play and breaking in transition to exploit Russia's backline and punish them for their structural mistakes. So when we look at the first example, it took Belgium at around 17 minutes to really get the game going, and it stems from Mertens switching the ball out into Vermaelen, who does step forward into Russia's half, and he ends up poking the ball into Eden Hazard, who did drop off into a central position. When Eden Hazard receives the ball, he is swarmed by Zobnin, and when he's swarmed by that midfielder, he ends up dropping the ball off to Kevin De Bruyne to receive the ball ahead of the narrow midfield bank. What he ends up seeing there now is that you have Castagna and Mertens looking to peel off Petrov and Zhirkov not looking to track that run. So De Bruyne clips the ball over the narrow Petrov into that right half space by the byline, and Mertens ends up keeping it in, and he delivers delivers across into that 6-yard box that evades Petrov, evades Castagna, and ends up falling into the path of Lukaku, but it ends up hitting off his shin, and we end up seeing Dzhikiya clear his lines. But just like that, one simple switch off, Kevin De Bruyne finding space, although it is a bit deeper, and he exploits the fact that Russia switched off there, and that was a warning sign for them, because shortly after that, Belgium were able to take the lead. When we look at that example, we see Boyata stepping forward and being closed down by Moranchuk and Zuba, and he ends up splitting them and finding Kevin De Bruyne dropping off into that deeper position once again. This time he's swarmed by Zobnin, and when he's swarmed by Zobnin, what we also see is that Yonov stepping to Vermaelen, and we also have Ozdoyev stepping into the path of Witsel. Kevin De Bruyne is lucky not to be dispossessed, and he ends up finding space in Russia's midfield because every other Belgian marker is occupied to find Eden Hazard. Now Eden Hazard has space to run at Semyonov and Fernandez, and when he runs at the right back and the center back, he slides the ball out to his brother Thorgan in that wider position. What Eden Hazard does well here is that he drives into the box with a straightforward run, and when he drives into that box, he takes the center back out of the game, and it allows Thorgan Hazard to isolate Fernandez, where we see him cut centrally and fire a shot past the keeper to put Belgium up 1-0. Russia does try to press and close down, but the risk that they do take is that if that press doesn't get off, you have so many key attacking players in that Belgian front line that can make you pay, and that's what happened there, and the Hazard brothers were able to punish Russia there. When we look to the second goal, it's also something similar. We see Witsel slide the ball out to Toby Alderweireld, then he steps into Russia's half before he's closed down by Zobnin, and we have Moranchuk to the left of him. So those two are closing him down. We have Mertens in that space between Petrov and Dzhikiya, and we also see the run of Lukaku across Semyonov. So we have Alderweireld clip the ball over Zobnin and over Dzhikiya into that right half space where Lukaku does drag out Semyonov, and he does a good job of nodding the ball clear of danger, but he ends up nodding it into the path of Eden Hazard free at the edge of the box. And before Dzhikiya can get across to close him down, Eden Hazard fires a low strike past the keeper. But just like that, long ball over the press, Lukaku doing a great job with the selfless run into that space, forces the defender into a mistake. No one's closing down Hazard, and he makes them pay because you can't leave Eden Hazard free in the final third. When we look to the final goal of that half, it's another breakdown, and it stems from Russia trying to press high and Belgium making them pay. So when we look at that, we see Alderweireld clear his lines from a Russian press, and in that press, we end up seeing Dzhikiya follow Mertens into Belgium's half. We have Petrov closing Castagna high, and that clearance from Alderweireld falls to Lukaku ahead of Semyonov. When he ends up trying to receive that ball, Semyonov does nod it away from Lukaku backing in, and we see Dzhikiya step towards the ball, and we have Ozdoyev also shifting towards Lukaku. So that's three Russian defenders trying to close down Lukaku to win that ball. So when Semyonov does nod it away from Lukaku, before Dzhikiya can get there, Lukaku pokes the ball into the path of Mertens now, who is free. And who also is free is Kevin De Bruyne, who should be picked up by Ozdoyev because you have Zobnin closing Witsel. So when that ball falls to Mertens and you have Dzhikiya and Ozdoyev out of position, he ends up sliding a pass into De Bruyne, who instantly runs forward into a big gap that does contain Semyonov marking off Lukaku and Eden Hazard breaking across Fernandez. So now De Bruyne is free to break on goal, 1v1 with the keeper. Fernandez does come across, and before Fernandez can come across, De Bruyne pokes the ball between his legs into the path of Eden Hazard, who taps the ball into the open net. And just like that, off simple pressing mistakes, Belgium are 3 goals ahead of Russia heading into halftime. So even when you do look at the second half, the game followed a similar theme, with both sides making like-for-like substitutions in terms of the roles that the players were adopting. But when you really look at it, Belgium were still being able to bypass the press of Russia, and they were able to add a 4th goal through that similar route, where you ended up having Eden Hazard make a selfless run and have Lukaku cut in once the fullbacks were taken out of the game by trying to press Belgium higher up the pitch. And even when you look at Russia, they were still finding space in behind the wing backs to create chances and put themselves into good positions. And even when you look at the consolation goal they do score later on, it did stem from poor set-piece defending, but the build-up to that goal was again down that side, a simple long ball over the top of the defense, and they were able to break through. So Belgium do have an issue in behind the wingbacks that they need to solve, but more importantly here is the fact that they were able to exploit a side that did try to press them higher up the pitch, showcasing their ability to break on the counter, but also showcasing the fact that they were able to make those selfless runs and get key players into isolation situations where they're able to maximize their talent. But when you really break that down and you really assess it, this is simply about Belgium being the better side. And when you look at it, this is a great indicator that they will be back to their best come Euro 2020. But let me know what you guys think. Is Belgium the real deal? And do you think they'll challenge Portugal and France at this summer's tournament? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.